meadows of the Sunshine State, redacted is his home, lives a man named David Wright, who pens the great unknown. Diet Coke runs through his veins, a decoy wallet keeps him rich. Paranoia fuels his pen and creativity's his niche. Write, publish, repeat, it echoes through the air. A chorus for creators, a call to those who dare. With cookies as his compass and a pen that won't retreat, he journeys through the pages. Write, publish, repeat. Dave hosts a show where writers go to share their secret arts, interviewing minds alike, dissecting all their parts. Aspiring authors gather here, a place to find their feet, fueled by inspiration. Write, publish, repeat. Sometimes Sean comes on the show,
and OMG, he talks a lot.
On and on and on and on and on, he shares his every thought. But all those words he spews can on occasion hit the spot. Dude keeps the conversation lively, even when he ties it in a knot. Write, publish, repeat, it echoes through the air. A chorus for creators, a call to those who dare. With cookies as his compass and a pen that won't retreat, he journeys through the pages. Write, publish, repeat.
Hello and welcome to Write, Publish, Repeat, the podcast for authors looking to write more and write better books. I'm your host, David Wright, best-selling author David Wright, I should say. And I'm on this journey with you, working to improve my craft by writing, publishing, and repeating. And that is the worst intro ever. But
wait. I just want to know. I want to know before we start. Did you practice that, like in the mirror?
No. Should I have?
Well, maybe. I mean, it would have been better, but that's not why I asked. I just wanted to imagine you sitting in front of the mirror and like.
I bet.
Like, you know what you can do for me? I'm gonna imagine you with like taking your hair into a man bun, and then just reciting that in the mirror. Will you do that?
Yeah.
Well, when we started, I wondered if we were going to stay more on track than in the past, and I guess I know the answer.
Not at all.
You know what? If we had to stay on track, I would just be like, Dave, this is your show. Well, it actually is Dave's show, but I'm going to crash it frequently, and I imagine
we're all drunk drivers.
Those will be the episodes that do go off.
It's fun to imagine somebody running across this for the first time and saying, this shit used to fly back in 2014 when these assholes were kind of the only game in town, but we've leveled up, and now they think they can just get on and talk about shit.
Well, I believe in the micro audience. I believe that you just speak to your
audience. Don't worry.
And you speak loudly. That's all.
Yes, anyway, today I'm joined by familiar faces, Sean Platt and Johnny B. Truant. We all did a podcast a while ago called the Self-Publishing Podcast, and we are here again today on the second podcast for Write, Publish, Repeat to find out what the hell happened to Johnny. So, Johnny, what the hell happened?
Wait.
Do you want to give some context to that, Sean? Because I feel like we need a little bit of a bridge.
Yeah. So
I'm bad at this. I should not be the host.
Yeah, the next time that Johnny comes on the podcast will be a lot more fluid. I'm not saying better. I'm just saying more fluid. We'll have a greater understanding of why we're here and what we're doing. This is pretty new. So Johnny has known about this since the reboot of Write, Publish, Repeat and podcast and all of the things that we're doing now. He heard about it for the first time a week ago today, I want to say, or a week ago yesterday, maybe. We met at the park.
That sounds ominous.
Yeah, I mean, it was daylight.
Well, I had to throw a Frisbee for him.
It was daylight, and there were no fluids exchanged, but it was at the park. Johnny's like, what the fuck? Why are you ruining my Friday? And I said, hey, can you do this? We're blowing the dust off of Write, Publish, Repeat. I think that's literally what I said. We're blowing the dust off of Write, Publish, Repeat. And would you like to come on? And Dave really, has it been a full month? This has happened relatively fast. It's part of a larger thing, but would you say the write, publish, repeat part has been about a month?
Yeah, a month or a day. I don't know. Time is meaningless. It's
Time is even
all a void.
Yeah, time is even more slippery for Dave these days than it used to be. But yeah, this happened fast. So there's a larger thing that we're doing with story merchants, and Dave was part of that team. And we were all just kind of like trying to find our place. And this seemed like a really, really great place for Dave, and a way to capitalize on an asset that we had, and to give Dave a space and a voice. And he is like what's really funny. So when we were first talking about this, this is true confession. So Dave says, I don't know, write, publish, repeat. Does that stuff still work? Okay, which is really funny because it's like, again, true confession, you guys. Dave never actually read write, publish, repeat.
I read to the wedding scene.
He read to the wedding scene. It was always something he was going to get to. So he didn't really get that there's foundational principles. Like, this is just write good books, connect with your audience, and care, do it again and again. So they're timeless principles, although we did completely update the resource. But yeah, like Dave is, even after we've worked together for 15 years now, and Dave is still trying to write, publish, repeat. Like it is more of a grind for him.
Can I ask an out of context write, publish, repeat question before we get to the story that this was supposed to be an introduction to?
Sure.
Yeah, of course.
Well, how do you, I'll just pretend that I'm the host back like in the old days. So write, publish, repeat.
I think Dave wishes you were.
Where would you draw the line between the strict interpretation of write, publish, repeat and rapid release, which kind of spawned out of write, publish, repeat? And now I feel a little like the creator of the Facebook like button, where I want to take it back.
Infinite scroll.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Johnny. Okay, so I think that write, publish, repeat it can work for anybody who sees their career as an author as something that isn't a one and done experience. So if you look at a lot of really successful authors, especially in the nonfiction space, something like, Malcolm Gladwell is one of the most famous nonfiction authors of all time, and he, started out in the New Yorker, write, publish, repeat, and then he wrote books, write, publish, repeat. Ryan Holiday is another great example of somebody who has done it kind of his own way. Like, he's definitely done write, publish, repeat, and written books that his publisher was like, yeah, no, you can't write that. And he's like, well, that's what I'm writing. And then he stayed true to himself in that manner. I'm going to write, publish, and repeat. I think rapid release is like the growth hormone version of it. And I don't feel quite the same way I used to about rapid release. I used to really bristle against it. Like, it was fun when we did it and we enjoyed that. It's not fun when you are all of a sudden a slave to that system. Then it doesn't become fun. You're just feeding
We released rapidly. We didn't do rapid release. Yeah, there's an important difference there.
Yeah, I agree. Now it's different because as a company, we rebelled so hard against that. Like, especially you and me, Johnny. By that time, David kind of gone into his dungeon for a few years. But we really tried hard. Like, we really tried hard to just be true to the books that we wanted to write and dabble in, KU when it made sense. But we really did try to write for ourselves primarily and not play that game. And then as a whole company, we really tried to be about the authors and the books. And then it is harder to make money that way. There's zero question about it. No matter how many times we've stabbed at that, that seems to be a true. So now at Sterling and Stone, there's actually two departments. There's the department that is, so we call it premium publishing, but the premium publishing actually, it's a little 1984 because premium publishing, those books generally don't make nearly as much money. They're there for prestige. They're there for reads and reviews because the stories are more valuable as IP. And then we have for-profit books, which are all like KU, they're rapid release. And then we have extreme profit books, which are like, they're just very, very targeted, and we're very aggressive about the release schedules, but we treat them as different products. And I think the real takeaway there, Johnny, is knowing exactly who you are as a creator and what kind of a platform you want. Because somebody who is like born to just write fast and do the rapid release and is kind of like doesn't really care, what they're doing. It's more about the rhythm of doing it and the commerce of doing it. That is a very different creator than somebody who really just wants to go deep and spend time with their stories, which like clearly that is you as a creator. And the more the industry changed and the tide changed to you have to do it this way, you have to be this on target genre wise, and you have to be, this systematic in the way you release, the more you bristled against it. And you saw it in the way you showed up, like not just in the business, but on the page, because it's not satisfying, right? Like we were always most satisfied when we were just like writing for each other almost. Like, hey, how much fun is this? I'm going to make you laugh. I'm going to make whatever.
Is this the intro to What the Hell Happened to Johnny? Are we talking about since? What's? Do you want me to just attempt to answer that question with the thrown together context? It's
what happened with all of us. So basically, we're just out here having a good time on this, right? So we don't really know where the podcast is going to go, but we know that it's going. So
and the podcast will be largely. Off of a cliff. Podcast will be largely Dave and a guest who isn't us, but will be Sean and I will appear occasionally. Is that kind of how we're looking at it?
Yeah, I think you'll appear occasionally. I'll appear less occasionally.
Yeah.
And I'll be bringing, friends on all the time, I imagine. Hey, Dave, I think you should talk to this person, right? But I really love your question, Johnny, about, what is the difference between a repeater and rapid release? And I do feel like there's a fundamental difference there. I feel like you can be a rapid releaser and be a repeater, but just because you're a repeater doesn't mean you're, a rapid releaser. So one of my friends named John, who will be on an upcoming episode soon, he has built a multi-million-dollar business off of, nonfiction self-publishing and doing it in a very different way than the way that, we built our business. But, it's incredible. And so I feel like there's a lot of really great examples out there in the write, publish, repeat world where you can monetize your words, you can monetize your publishing acumen, and you can think around corners. There's a lot of growth in this space. And for a long time, I felt disconnected from it. By the time we left, I felt like a little bit disconnected. I didn't really love where the industry had gone as a whole. And I felt like I wasn't able to put my best self on the fiction side or on the nonfiction side. And I don't want to do anything if I can't do it with my heart and soul and be good at it, and I wasn't feeling very good at it. So the retreat happened at the right time. But there's a part of me that really loves to not teach necessarily, but teach by example and just talk about the things that are working and talk about the things that aren't. And, we've had a long year and just because we love telling you guys everything. So this is episode 2 right now, but it's because I fucked up and scheduled wrong. And so Dave and I actually haven't been able to record episode 1. So we'll go back in time and do that. And I'll kind of talk about the last year and what that's been like. But it was a big year and a big year of change. And there was an opportunity to get out and do something really new. And I've been kind of like itchy to speak a little bit. And so this was a really great forum. I could help Dave build something. I could build something big over here and have basically a bar that I could walk into at any time and bring my buddies and we could talk.
Norm.
And, and help the community. Like I really, really loved. I was just at an event a couple of weeks ago, and I know.
Dave, do you think if you and I walked out, he'd notice?
I know it's still an intro.
I'm still waiting to answer that question.
Yeah. So I was at an event a couple of weeks ago that had nothing to do with publishing at all, and somebody came up to me and said, "Are you Sean Platt?" And then proceeded to tell me about how this time that the three of us, how much it meant to them. And that still means a lot to me. And I want to show up in that way again. I want to show up for the community. And so that's why this exists. And so, yeah, Johnny, the spell of time, I think, were, there might be people who are listening to this for the first time, and they'll probably never listen again because they're like, that dude with the nose is a rambling motherfucker, and I just can't. But for everyone, go ahead, Johnny. Tell a brief intro on basically.
Oh, I got to be brief. Fucker. So I'll just start.
Time's up.
I'm conscious of your hard stop. So yes, who you were in the self-publishing podcast days, and then the last few years since we shuttered the show and said goodbye.
Well, I used to host the self-publishing podcast. So for those of you who are new to this, I mean, we all were hosts, but I used to be the kind of ringmaster, and I'm trying to step back from that. And it's so unusual to have Dave like cracking the whip and being like, "Come on, man, come on, I'm wrangling this show." But we had the self-publishing podcast back in the day, and it was a lot of fun. And I actually went back and was trying to find those old recordings just for posterity, just for myself, just to have them, and I'll put them in a folder. You guys can listen to them. But we did that for a long time, and I was part of this same machine with you two. But it was interesting to hear your answer to some of the stuff that you just said, because just to be clear, I'm not part of that anymore. I'm not part of the company. But Sean and I wrote, depending on how you count it, I don't know, I would say around 100 books together, depending on how you count. And some are available, and some have been, some are other pen names or that sort of thing. We're very experimental. But about a year and a half ago, Sterling and Stone was kind of going in one direction, and I was kind of going in another direction. And I've always been kind of fiercely individualistic about some things. But I don't know exactly how to say this, but for me, I'm kind of realizing that the whole of publishing is an art that I enjoy. And it was kind of an interesting challenge to say, well, what if I just did all of it? And that's what I've been doing. So I've been on my own. Sean and Dave are continuing with the rest of Sterling and Stoned and doing all. Did I just say Stoned? That was a Freudian slip. Sterling and Stoned. So I've been publishing on my own. I actually just finished. This is actually a really apropos timing. Just today, I finished my first book since we did part ways. And amicably parted ways.
Wait! Congratulations!
Yeah, thank you.
Is it fiction or nonfiction?
It's fiction. It's in the Gore Point universe, so it wasn't totally on my own because it is in a world that Sean and I developed together.
Seconds, Dave.
Right, but I did write that, and I have had. It's been difficult for me to write on my own, in part because of, I think, the larger systemic thing that, Sean, that you were talking about, where you said, I forget how you put it, but you said something about the way showing up on the page was just different as well. It wasn't just showing up in the company. And having had some time to reverse engineer a lot of that, I've not only relearned how it is that I write when I write without thinking about it, ironically now having to think about it so that I can not think about it, which is very interesting, and I can expound on that if anyone wants me to. But also the fact that thinking a little bit too hard was actually a big deal. It was actually a problem. And so when we were writing, I usually use Pattern Black for this, although I love the way Pattern Black turned out. Pattern Black is a book that Sean and I wrote.
Do you consider that the book that broke you?
I would say that there was something else that broke me, but I think that was during that period. There was another book that I was involved in that was after that, I think, that was just as complicated. And the short version of it is that I tend to write books that have a lot of complications and turns and twists. So after enough time doing that, I started thinking about the turns and twists, and wouldn't it be cool if there was this weird metaphor thing that was happening, or there was this sort of. Is
that what happened to Shyamalan?
Yeah, maybe. I've actually kind of made that comparison in a weird way. And so I went in looking for the complexity, but interestingly, I need to start with, if I'm writing on my own, this is the short version. If I'm writing on my own, I need to know vaguely what the story is going to be. So for Fat Vampire, it would be overweight guy becomes a vampire and doesn't fit in. I just need to know how to get one person or two people to an inciting incident. And that's it. If I plan more than that, it really screws me up. So it's been a deconstructing rather than a building of new structure. And that's what I learned with this new book, Suicide Flats, which is in the Gore Point universe. Is it started with a very simple premise. It was going to be a short. It became a novella. And then I said, screw it, it's a full-length book.
When's the last time you were able to effectively write a short?
When you made me? I mean, I don't naturally write shorts. And I think it's because I really like to, even a scene. So if you think about the construction of a short, let's say oh my God, a 2,000 word short, I can barely imagine it. Well, that requires several scenes. Unless you're writing a true one scene short, you're going to have several different scenes. They just need to happen kind of quickly. And my scenes are at least 1,000 words. Like, I need to set a mood. There's just a certain way that I write. And so if I'm trying to make many scenes happen, it naturally becomes a 5, 6, 10,000 word thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Writing with both of you guys, you're opposite in that way. So you'll have a chapter that, like the beats are, hey, this should be around 2,500 words. And the chapter will be 9,000 words. You're like, well, I needed to set it up. And Dave will have a chapter, like the same beats, and the chapter will be 165 words. And it's underwriting versus overwriting, but it's like Dave, I think, sees stuff in his head and uses shorthand for it, and you see stuff in your head and kind of explain it to yourself. And it's very different on the page.
It's actually, again, this is stuff that I didn't know, and I'm kind of learning. I'm totally distracted because I got a new dog a few days ago, and he will not leave me alone. So that's what's going on over here.
At least your dog loves you.
At least lots of people.
What does that mean?
What a dick move. And now I forgot what I was going to say. I was going to say something you were saying about scenes and setup. And I know what it was. So realizing. So I've talked to some people recently.
I'm such a dumbass.
I've talked again to some people who do, when you talk to people who do film, right? And it's very precise when you're writing scripts. And we tried to write scripts for a while. And it's like you have to go in knowing what you're going to say. And I've leaned into the fact that I don't often know what I'm going to say. I don't know even how a scene is going to turn out. I mean, into the last section of this book, I kind of knew with the one sentence description what was going to happen, but I didn't know all of the details. That's a child I have tied up. And
in his basement.
Borrowed him from Dave.
Yeah, I borrowed him from Dave. But I had to write into it and figure it out. And I think, so I was talking to somebody who was like, I don't know how you have that much to say. And the answer, or how you can say it, it was weird because what he said implied that, how could you fill all those words? How do you know what to say? And I'm like, I don't know what to say. That's why I need so many words. Yeah. Because what I find I do, and I've always done this, I just haven't thought about it, is I will start to reach an explanation for something that's happening in the book that most people probably would have known very early in the book. They would have known that, they would have seeded it, they would have set it up. I will start to realize what's probably happening behind the scenes much later in a book, and then I just keep mentioning it. It's like I'm whitewashing it. It's like I'm like, okay, you remember this, right? You remember this. And then when I read back, I'm always kind of pleasantly surprised that it works. It doesn't feel like I invented it halfway through, but I think that's why I can't write short.
So are you a pure pantser then?
I think I'm a lot closer to a pure pantser than I used to think, but we won't know that. When I say we, I mean me. But I'll share. I'll tell you guys until I write something that's totally and completely new. This was a cheat because I knew the world. I had things to reference. But it does feel a lot closer to pantser. But I tried that as a pure pantser with a book that Sean and I wrote called The Island, where I didn't know what the hell was going on, and I got lost. So there's got to be somewhere in between.
Yeah, and he was so lost. He gave me the first early chapters and basically was like, can you tell me what's going on?
Yeah, I literally said that. I said, what do you think is happening in this book? Because I don't know.
So it is a really interesting way to write, for sure. And I think that some of our best stuff has come from that. So, I mean, even from Unicorn Western, the very first thing, and for those of you at home who don't know, Unicorn Western is mine and Johnny's 9-part epic, Bustin' on Dave.
It's also the thing I think that if I could only choose one thing to be remembered for, that's probably it.
Dude, I love Unicorn Western. I was going to get a poster for my office, and I just never did it when I moved in last month. Whatever. Anyway, ever since Unicorn Western, Johnny, you always talked about being that. You really identified with that Stephen King analogy of the finding the fossil, and that the story is there, and that it's your charge to kind of like brush it off and find what it is and find its place, but that you're not actually creating the story. You're unearthing it. And I think that does show up on the page for you. Like, your sense of discovery is always very exciting as a co-author and as a reader. I always really love that in your work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a trusting the process sort of thing to rediscover that, because I was just young and dumb enough back in the day that I just bulldozed ahead and I didn't think twice about it. But then it's like it's the difference between unconscious competence and conscious competence, which usually it goes the other way around. Usually you start where you're like, okay, I know what I'm doing and I can be competent here, and then you become fluid and unconsciously competent. But I think I went the other way around. I think I was going off of gut. And then the more I learned, the more I tried to implement things that normal people do when they write stories. And that screwed me up. So I had to relearn how to be unconsciously competent in a conscious way, if that makes sense.
And do you like having the fluidity in your experience allows you to kind of do anything and have a lot of confidence when it comes on the page, but that bravado that you used to have is harder to find, right? So when we were at because it's overthinking, right? So are you overthinking as much as you were like 18 months ago, say?
Well, I'm going to answer that a little sideways, and that's that I've leaned more into who I am as a writer, which again, I think I was doing out of stubbornness or ego or something like that manifested as leaning in, or, because I would always, even when we were writing together, we are still writing together. We just haven't done it in a little while, but some of those early books, it was like, well, I absolutely need the final cut, right? I would go through and so I think that's kind of how it was, is it was a little bit of like, the swagger came from what swagger usually comes from, which is ego. And I think that now it's been more like, okay, I want to go ahead and trust myself in ways that I didn't used to do, which means probably the most easy to understand thing I could bring up, but that isn't the most important, but it is easiest to understand, is how much I lean into pop culture references in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to kind of double clutch on some of that. And now it's like, especially and I can talk about the whole artisan author thing if you want.
Did Platt end up having RoboCop or no?
It didn't. But it does have He-Man. It did have, because it takes place in 89, and I was going to make a Bill Nye reference, but Bill Nye didn't show up until like 93, 94, so I had to make it Mr. Wizard. So, but there are a lot of 80s and 90s references, and I just lean in. I'm just like, okay, this is going to be weird. Some people aren't going to get this. The younger readers are going to wonder what the fuck I'm talking about, but... And I think it's kind of like
talking about Bill Cosby in a positive way. I don't understand.
Oh my God. It would be fun to do something like that where culture has changed around it. And I'd probably insert some sort of self-aware joke about how Cosby, like somebody be like, there's something not right about this guy.
I went to a party and drank all night, and I don't remember any.
Oh my God.
Wow. It was already enough. Jesus.
Well, this is the Self-Publishing Podcast 2, apparently.
How?
Yes.
Dependable. I appreciate it.
I left out the part about pudding pops. So I'll just leave that to your imagination.
So that's the answer to Dave's question at the beginning of the podcast, which I'm repeating toward the end of the podcast, is I went away and did my own thing. We're still friends. We don't work together in a business capacity. Sean and I will write together again. We just haven't, because there's been a lot more largely in his court. And I'm kind of doing everything else on my own, which is fun.
Yeah, it was funny. So for a while, I was like, I'm ready to go whenever you are. And then at the end of July, Johnny texts and he says, August 1st, bitch. I'm ready. And I'm like, oh, I'm not. I had a whole bunch of commitments. I was like, I can't.
And my next year is booked.
Yeah. But yes, I am very, very much looking forward to it. And I think that I think it's the kind of thing where it's not even absence makes the heart grow fonder. That's not the right thing here, because like we had an amazing creative partnership. We have created amazing work together that I think we both very much love. But it was a process thing, because my process is largely dictated by Sterling and Stone's direction. And, I'm a really malleable creator, so I'm working with everybody. And Johnny had to kind of get folded into this one way of doing things, and he was going more internal. He was thinking deeply on stuff. At the very end, I was just like, dude, it's not fun anymore. Like, it's not fun to write. And
it wasn't fun for me either.
Yeah.
It was like, without going into too much, because who cares, the way I usually say it is that I wanted to go deep and you wanted to go wide. And So we had that core in common, but I wasn't interested in like working with other writers and building businesses out and stuff. I wanted to keep telling the worlds. I wanted to go deep into books. Sufficient that I don't even particularly care about like audiovisual stuff at all. I'm a book guy. That's it. And I like being just a book guy. And so I think that this recalibrated it because we don't have to pull at the same thing anymore.
No, it's just about telling the story. And there was never an issue in telling the story. Like, I cannot think of a single creative conflict that we ever had.
No, we've never had a complete creative conflict. You know, this podcast is pretty great, but you know what it needs? It needs a host.
Dave?
Oh, hi.
Well, we did get through Johnny's first question.
Yeah, and time's up. Wow.
Remember his hard stop.
Yes. What kind of dog do you have? I think that's a question on everybody's mind.
He's an Australian Shepherd mix.
Is that the ones with the blue eyes?
This one does not have blue eyes.
Okay.
I think they can have blue eyes.
Yeah, I'd
turn my camera, but I'd have to turn the whole computer.
Okay. So,
Did Dave freeze? Because
I think Dave froze. So what you're going to discover...
Oh, damn it.
He's gone.
Now I don't know.
Well, let's talk about other shit. And please do cut this out, by the way. Okay, so audience, if this is here, I take no responsibility. This is not my gig. Fuck these guys.
I feel like we should leave this in. And edit out this part right now where I'm saying we should leave it in so it looks like a fuck up. Like, oh my God, these guys are gone this long and they're this incompetent.
Okay, as long as you leave this part. Not my fault, not my gig.
Yeah, let me see. I think Dave had an agenda around here somewhere. In all actuality, the question was talking about being an artist and author. We've already touched on a lot of this, actually. But what does it mean to you to be an artist and author? Because when you did leave and you did go on the independent track, that was kind of the language that you used. And like, I'm deeply a language person. I really appreciate, when you put something in a container and using the words artist and author, I immediately understood at a larger level, like, oh, this is exactly what he's doing and why. So do you want to put the origin of that phrase and like what it means to you and what it means to what you're driving at?
Yeah, sure. For anybody who wants the more complete story, I wrote a podcast on Russell Nolte's Substack, which is authorstack.substack.com, and it's called We're Entering the Age of the Iconoclast Writer. Now, I wanted that to be artist.
Never mind. I don't want to interrupt you.
I wanted that to be the age of the artist writer, but he wanted a bigger word. So he added iconoclast. Like, I'm not being that presumptuous. But that story, that kind of tells the story. So basically, it was when I went to the last 20 Books conference, which was a year ago, almost exactly as we record this, because we're going to the first Author Nation, which replaced it a year later. And I talked to a bunch of people, and I hadn't been out in the public for a long time. This is one of those things where, like, I'm talking to the audience, but you already know this, Sean. I I'm sorry, somebody just entered the room, and I don't know what happened there. I like that Sean is continuing as if this isn't a video podcast.
Oh, I know it's a video podcast. Why would that change my behavior?
We weren't really working together as much in terms of like business and stuff. But more importantly, in my last few years with Sterling and Stone, I wasn't doing anything other than writing. I was just in my writer cave, and I wasn't doing any of the admin stuff or the covers of the marketing. I was barely communicating with my email list, and I was just doing that. And so when I went to the conference, it was like culture shock. It was like, wow, I'm back in this world around all these people who are doing all these intricate things. And in that time, it was kind of like if you don't see a kid for a few years and they've gotten a lot older, and you're like, whoa, when I see you every day, I notice how I don't notice your growth, but all of a sudden, and that's the way it felt, because that entire industry felt like, again, culture shock was, wow, okay, so write as fast as I write is no longer impressive to anybody. These people have taken write, publish, repeat to an extreme, rapid release sort of end, where there was this, at least at 20 Books, there was, as a whole, this like widespread perception that you needed to produce as fast as humanly possible, and it seemed very tactical. Like there were craft discussions, but that wasn't what was on everybody's, at least that I saw. And so when I started talking to people, I was like, is this business gone past me? Like, I don't want to be part of this business anymore because I don't have an interest in that. But because the industry as a whole had gone so far in that direction, where it's faster, Kindle Unlimited, all you can eat, don't stop or you'll die, it meant that the other pole had to exist. If it was going to exist at all, it was like the fact that this one went so far this way meant that this one had to go this way too. And realizing that readers as well, that some of them didn't want that like faster KU. Now that's great for some people, but there were a lot that were like, well, I want the kind of weird handcrafted books. I want something, it's like being a vinyl collector where, okay, I can download that MP3, but I want this kind of leveled up version, or I want something where the bass player was experimental and doing something weird rather than something that sounds like everything else. And so I'm calling that other fork like an artisan approach to writing, which is it's the exact opposite of rapid release. It's slowing down, taking my time. It's very reader focused. I mean, I'm literally making fan connections one at a time, like literally one at a time.
Do you want to tell the story about meeting somebody to sign their book? Because I love this story.
Yeah, I have a few books in Book People, which is an iconic Austin bookstore. They're Sean's books too. Fat Vampire is mine, but Unicorn Western and Pretty Killer are there. And I told my list about it, and I said, hey, I have books in a bookstore. This is great. I've always wanted to have books in a bookstore. If you happen to come to town and you want to get one, send me an email and I'll come down and meet you. And so I finally had somebody do it. His name was Ryan. And I went down and we got a cup of coffee and I signed the book. But that's the sort of thing I'm doing where I wouldn't slow down to do that.
But then the person disappeared.
Dave did that, but yeah, right, exactly. Did I sign the book? Did you get it out in the world? Okay, now nobody will hear from you again.
I would have like done a complete background check on the person before I met them.
Dave had
I'd have a sniper in a tower.
For dinner last night.
Local author abducts fan while trying to not be abducted by fan.
Exactly. I like to be proactive in my prevention of kidnapping.
Yes.
So I'm going to have to take over hosting from Dave. Dave's like, should I host? I don't know. I'm the host. Should I host?
Well, Johnny was still talking about meeting the person.
No, in the old days, we would have called it, well, is that the lull? So I had to jump in before it became the lull. So just a little bit of background to why we had to, because the natural flow of this would have just been to wait and, record the first episode and then get Johnny on for a second episode. But it was my fuck up. And I was like, hey, Johnny, can you jump through hoops to do this on a different schedule? And he was like, no.
I had about 6 calendar invites.
Yeah, but we really wanted to record this, and the reason that was important to me, it was because, like Johnny said, we are going to Author Nation next week, and we would be flying in both directions together, but I'm going to visit my mom. Dave, calm down. Wow. I'm going to visit my mom for a few days after the conference, and so I'm flying to Long Beach instead. But I am very, very excited to hang out with Johnny and to see a lot of you out there who are listening to this now. And I thought it'd be really cool if we could record this and then to send an email before we go out and say hello. Anyway, Johnny does have a hard stop. So, Dave, are there any last minute things that you would like to ask Johnny?
Last things.
No. Well, we're going to talk with Johnny again in the next episode. I think a lot of the questions I have are,
Oh, we are? Fuck that shit. All right, yeah, I'm down.
So, I figured you'd love this so much.
Yeah. So the whole thing, look, you guys, I'm going to make you a promise right now. This show is going to get better. Now,
a pro would just make it better before putting out the apologetic episode.
No, that's not how we do things. That's not how a repeater does things. You do it and you get better through iteration. So we're going to get better. That's a fact. But these first few three, we kind of mapped them out as number one would be, me and Dave, just like, what the hell's going on? And then number two would be, where have we all been? That's the three of us.
Now, this has definitely been number two.
Talk about your rapid release.
Right. And then number 3 would be Dave and Johnny together. And I won't be here.
Dave and I have only known each other for like 12 years. That's going to be awkward.
It's going to be so awkward.
It'll be like whenever I talk to my dad on the phone. It's like,
Can I just say that I've been distracted this entire time that Dave looks like a mashup of one generation above and one generation below me? You look like what would happen if you combined my dad and my son.
That's like 3 times as funny if you've seen them both.
wow. I am ageless and aged at the same time.
Oh, Davey. All right, Dave. So, do you have? Is this too much for you? We don't have theme music. We don't have sign outs. Like,
Yo.
So
Just drop the mic and leave.
Those of you following at home, this is our second episode, number 2, as Johnny referred to it, but also our legit first time, which actually does feel appropriate. So, thank you for being here, Dave. Do you want to sign us out?
Yes, thank you for coming and listening, or both. I don't know.
Sorry.
Wow.
Maybe you should just end with an apology.
Yes. I'm sorry for this episode and all future episodes.
Mm-hmm. Everybody remember I'm a guest, not a host. Don't want my brand fucked up.
Need a disclaimer. Yes.
All right.
Goodbye.
We can't laugh into Johnny's hard stop.
And now.